If you're hungry visually or if you just need noodles, Chinatown is a great place to come. I've been coming down here for probably 35 years. First as a kid and then in the 25 years that I lived in New York City. And it's just a walking meditation of sensory overload, sights and sounds and textures. I know a lot of artists that live down here for that reason. In fact, my wife and I first told our parents that we were having a baby in Chinatown, in our favorite restaurant, which is called Big Wing Wong behind me. We had a table, we had both sets of parents, and then I had the waiter bring a roast duck and a plate of noodles and also a covered dish. And when he lifted the cover, it was a pacifier. So anyway, it's part of my life, and anything part of my life is part of my work. So never underestimate the power of noodles.
The other night I went to a fabulous panel discussion on the late works of Roberto Matta, the Chilean surrealist painter, who played a very important role in the development of the New York school, the abstract expressionists in the 40s and 50s. And these were massive mural-sized canvases, clearly meant for public consumption. They were like, 20 by 30 feet. Full of kinetic, crackling energy and movement, and for me at least, full of freedom and permission. I came away really high from that show. And some of the things that were germane to the panel discussion were the antecedents, the source of some of his language, his imagery, which is derived from the subconscious, from dreams. There were biomorphic things derived from nature. There were architectural references with cubes and exploding cubes. And then there were political references as well, all forced to coexist in this very shallow scrim of a space. The images tended to be collected right at the front, and then they were hosted by a very soft, diffuse puddling and pooling of color in the background. And that negotiation of those two types of space got me thinking about another Latin American painter who I've loved for years, named Carlos Merida, a Guatemalan painter, who also did mural-sized works, but the work that I'm familiar with is more intimate in scale, in which he would also have a very soft, diffuse, hazy colors, pooled colors, which would host very concise drawn lines and images, which were derived often from Mayan culture. And I bring this up because it's similar to the way I'm trying to work in my paintings as well. Negotiate two types of space. One more hazy, more soft, more puddled and pools of color, which suggest romanticism. And then the other, much more concise, much more precise, incised lines, which often suggests something more classical, something more defined. One a bit more about awareness, intuition, the romantic. The other a bit more about identification, codification, the more specific, the classical. I like that shifting forth between the two, and I like the kind of forced coexistence of the two. I'm learning more every day about those two painters, but I sense a slight change coming in my work because I've often, for the last several years, had fairly aggressive, sharp, geometric references in the work, even though they're very nature, landscape based. And I sense, a slight change coming in that I will sort of oscillate back into something a little more softer, a little more, curled, more organic, more arabesque in a way. And we'll see what happens. So I'll keep showing images as these things develop. When I'm making a painting, I'm always cognizant of the rectangle, of the four sides of the painting. And the entire world, for us as a painter, exists in that proscenium, in that rectangle. And I use the word proscenium deliberately. When I was a kid, I was very interested, and still am, in magic, in the notion of creating an artificial proscenium in which seemingly miraculous things could unfold. And I remember building square and rectangular boxes in which I would insert 45-degree angle mirrors, which you could open and then produce silks and flowers from an empty box, at least to the viewer. And also when I was 6 or 7, my parents got me a puppet stage. Here's a picture of it. And I would invent, with a cast of characters, these narratives a main character and then a series of supporting characters in this rectangular proscenium, often to an audience of, of just myself, even though my parents would watch, for hours. And it's, you know, I wasn't aware of it then, but in retrospect, what I really dug, again, was that notion of the rectangle and the idea of a hierarchy of characters. And it's similar to the way that I create paintings to this day. There'll be often a main driver of the painting, something in terms of brighter color, larger scale, more prominent in the composition, and then a series or layers of supporting characters. And if you look for it, you can see it throughout art history. Here's a Cézanne, for example, where there is one apple in the group that is lighter in value, a bit brighter in intensity. It's also placed slightly off center, and then it breaks the horizon line of the table in the back, and it also is kind of framed by the gentle arabesque of the bowl. Clearly given more importance, more vitality than some of the other things. And it's a beautiful way of creating a series of spatial anticipations and hierarchies to build a beautifully composed picture. It's not the only way to paint, but it's one way to paint. And it's certainly one of the things that I employ when I'm working. We've been talking about Matta, so I want to talk a little bit about the color black. And I know that a lot of young painters are often discouraged from using black, which I think I disagree with. Black is a very useful and evocative color, and yes, it can dirty other hues, but I don't understand what's so bad about that. I often use and prefer sometimes dirtied colors. There is a use for them, and a lot of times the muck, the mud that's left over in the bottom of the turp bowl becomes a very important part of the personality of other colors that I'll use. Generally, I'll come back to two blacks, ivory black and Mars black. Ivory black tending to be a little bit cooler hue, and Mars a little bit warmer. And also you can mix what's called chromatic black. My friend Robert Gamblin of Gamblin Artist Colors makes a beautiful chromatic black. When I want to make it myself, I'll take alizarin crimson, Prussian blue, and then a little bit of raw umber. And the beauty of a chromatic black is it allows you to shade a color without killing the color. You can just bring it down levels in value. I often make my greens derived from black. So here's a little bit of ivory black, then we'll pull in some cadmium yellow, and you can see it creates a beautiful dull olive green. From there, I may introduce cadmium red, medium, a nice kind of dull red, and then we'll take a little titanium white and introduce it. And you can get kind of a beautiful smoky pink color. Like tea berry gum. Remember tea berry? That's become a technical color in my toolbox. And then from there, this kind of dusty pink color, why not a little cerulean blue? So there, a pretty nice array of moods, all derived from ivory black in this case. Frank Auerbach uses black. Degas used black. Max Beckmann. If that's not permission, then I don't know what is.